This is Unmasked. I'm Kedra Flowers. This podcast is about saying the thing you usually think through first, the truth that gets edited, softened, or swallowed. These conversations are not polished. They're simply honest. And they're for anyone who's tired of explaining themselves to be understood. There was this user's guide, and it's so interesting. I think it was a coaching program that I was a part of and, spending 30 plus thousand a year investing in. And one of the exercises we did is created a user's guide. And that user's guide was intended to help others work with us, right? So that how we work and whatever. And, the goal would be to deploy that out to the team. And we all share our various user guides with one another so that we can be the most productive team. Okay. So I'm going to read mine because just like everything else in my life, as I unmask, everything looks different in hindsight. And, this has happened over and over and over again in my life. This time, everything looks different. And so I'm going to go through, and today we're going to read the user's guide, which is going to be fun, and we'll chit chat as we go through it. Okay, so I am neurodivergent and operate somewhat differently to maintain focus and complete tasks. This is shared with new employee, team members, and contractors and has been useful in communication. My personal mission is to impact the lives of everyone I touch, either directly or through business ventures, by contributing to expanded freedom and peace of mind. Things critical to know. I work from a place of creation at all times. My brain applies the facts and circumstances at the time and responds based on that. Think of a basketball player on the court. For this reason, my answer will likely change if you ask the same question at different times and under different circumstances. I shared this with a group of friends, and oh my God, the pushback and screams and laughs and responses I got from neurotypicals, right? They're like, what? Like, you are insane. So anyway, let's keep going. I am repelled by gossip and negativity. As a small business, payroll, etc., directly impacts me and my family. Don't mistake my hands-off management for low performance expectations. I'm hands-off to allow you the opportunity to shine, or to allow us together to be clear if this relationship is not a fit. Best ways to work with Kedra. At any given moment, I am juggling multiple balls and multiple businesses. I structure my week based on current priority. The big rocks first, then fit in as many pebbles as possible. If I make a request, it is because it is a priority. It is a big rock. Please respond to the request with confirmation of completion and/or outcome by text. If emailing, also send a text letting me know that the request is completed and to see the email. It's always best to assume I am not on my computer. How to ensure your communication is received. Immediate response required communications. You should call or text with clear time goals. Review needed within 1 to 3 business days. I am easiest to reach by text and prefer to be texted when an email is sent that requires immediate feedback. I get distracted easily, so please don't tell me something that requires my action on it without sending me an email on the same thing. Alerting me that you have sent me an urgent or action required email is huge. I love solutions. Please come to me with your challenges, but be prepared to share your solutions to those challenges. Oh my God, pause. I had no clue that everybody didn't think like, well, I did. I thought I was smarter than everybody else. Like I just thought, well, I'm smarter than everybody else, right? But I didn't realize that there was actually a thinking difference, right? I knew I had ADHD, neurodivergent, right? But I didn't understand. I did not understand. At the time, there was an employee who never was done with her work. Like she did not accomplish the stuff. She just didn't do it. And so we would get in our team meeting and it was like she came prepared with a list of these great ideas. She was probably reading me because the way that my brain works was it's operating on the court. So when you bring up a new idea that really does work and looks good, I'm going to go there. Like I'm going to dance in that idea. I'm going to walk down that path. And so next thing you know, we're out of time. It's time to get back to work. And at the end of the day, she hadn't done her required work. So anyway, okay, back to the user guide. If I don't answer the phone or text, it's because I am occupied. But it is always my intent to call back at my first availability. If it is urgent, please add that to the text. If you don't hear back, please call again. I have simply gotten distracted. Charge it to my head, not my heart. I like to be mindful of the time. Show up early and prepared for meetings. Now, prepared for meetings. Okay, this is a pause. Prepared for meetings means your work done. Like, that's what that means in my head. What that means, I don't know what it means in other people's head, but it doesn't mean prepare for meetings as I meant prepare for meetings. Okay. I need team members who think on their feet, ask necessary questions, and get things done. My theory on performance, completion in all caps, is all that matters. Now, at the end, please also feel free to design your own and share it with me and anyone you work with on projects. It really keeps things running smoothly. Okay, that was it. That's the user's guide. So now as I'm reading a book by Saul Smith, S-O-L Smith, it's called Flourishing as a Neurodivergent Adult. Well, that's not what it's called. It's called The Autistic's Guide to Self-Discovery, and then Flourishing as a Neurodivergent Adult. This book is like reading an autobiography of my life. But it's interesting because it was such an easy read. It took a while because all of the tabs and underlines, which is the same way I used to read the Bible, right? I write in the sides, the tab, that's just how I read books. But this particular book had information that was new to me. And that's not always the case, right? And so as I'm reading, I am learning terms. I am learning thinking differences. I am learning why I am the way I am. Like, it's interesting. So if anyone's listening to this, if you can relate, I definitely recommend grabbing that book because it's like, for me, I found it to be a dictionary of my life. Years ago, I started a course called Dreams Fulfilled. Originally, it was designed to be a 6 weeks, a Saturday course. And then I think the first session might have been 6 weeks. And then we condensed it to 4 weeks because it was supposed to be 2 hours a Saturday. And it ended up being like every Saturday it'd be like 4 hours, like it would be double that. And sometimes we'd sit there and keep going and keep going, and I realized, okay, oh, yeah, let's just do 4 weeks with the longer sessions, because it was a course that was conversation driven. And the conversation would get so good that it would be hard to let go and disconnect to come back the next week. So anyway, in looking back at that, what I've always thought, like, people would say, where'd this come from? How did you design the course? Well, the issue was the course wasn't designed. There was no written manual anywhere for the course. The course was who was in the room. So the people in the room, including myself, were designing and creating this conversation in real time. So basically, there were some key concepts. One of the first ones was God. That was the initial conversation. And then we ended that, no more God the rest of the session, period. We gave God 30 minutes at the beginning, not because God wasn't in the room, but because God was in the room. And in order for him to be in the room, we had to let go of our picture of him and allow him to be there how he was. And a lot of the feedback that I got was like, oh my gosh, this is eye-opening. I look at things in a completely different way. And, all of these things, not as in I, Kedra, but as in the person speaking, sharing that they are now seeing life differently. Well, as I read the Autistic's Guide to Self-Discovery, I understand that I thought, which, yes, it still came from God. At the end of the day, it's all coming from God. I mean, let's just leave that there. But I thought there was this special download, right, that I'm getting. I'm thinking through this as I go, right, because this is how I live my life. This is what happens. There's this special download that's coming. But the term for it is lateral thinking. It is... it's funny. Lateral thinking I was getting ready to say, is literally thinking, right? It's thinking. And that is different than what most people do. But it's literal thinking. It is literally thinking. And when you are thinking in real time, the answer is always different. What you're considering is different. Where you are is different. Your experience. It's actually a really good example from religion standpoint is the Bible. Every time you read the Bible, you get something different out of it. That's how my brain works. Every time we have a conversation, you're going to get something different out of my thinking, maybe not out of my mouth, right? Because I was masking, but what's going on in my head is going to be something different. And so, so the user's guide. Now, did it work? Yeah, it actually did. It worked to repel people who would be repelled by the way I think, because that guide was a picture into what's going on. People who would be repelled by ADHD operations, right? By needing to text and to reinforce I didn't know that that's what that was. I knew that that's what had to happen for me to perform at the level that I expected myself to perform at. In retrospect, I look back and I realized that I also expected other people to perform at that level. And I remember it's kind of a funny joke around within my family is that you fired everybody in the family that you hired, right? Shit, I've fired everybody, period, that I've hired. That's just the bottom line, is because the bar is so effing high. The bar is so effing high. It's hard to get there, right? That's my life. That's the bar I set for myself. So guess what? I have not met it, but it's still there. It ain't went nowhere. I can get up a level and the level goes higher, you know. It is simply just how my brain works. And so what the challenge is, as I share this to you listening, is, how does your brain work? What works for you in your life or in your business or in your relationships? What would your user guide look like? And at the end of the day, how do you operate? How do you work? How can people around you in your circle, at work, in your community, get the most from you? And my ultimate mission was to improve lives that I touch. So how can the communication help me do that? That's the user guide, how to use me to your own benefit. Really. Although that's not how people took it, which is really funny. So we'll come back to the user's guide again because I don't want to be too long. But I do think it was an excellent exercise in me communicating how I work, how I think, how things. And so in retrospect, as I do the Unmasked podcast, I think that this user guide is perfect, right? Because it actually was, even though I didn't know that, a peek behind the mask. It was a peek behind. I didn't know there was a mask. It was a peek behind the mask. So people, the group, there's a Big Brother group that I'm a part of that I love. Like that is my, they say you have your family, your chosen family. They're my chosen family. And so they actually, I posted it in there because that's our little safe space. And oh my God, the responses I got were just absolutely hilarious. As someone who takes things personally would have gotten offended. I didn't, but what I did get, would I share the user? Well, yeah, I have shared it today. Originally, I think it was done in 2021, and shared or whatever widely to all the employees, contractors, whatever. Now seeing the reaction from neurotypicals, I probably would not share it wouldn't share it that way. Now what I do more than anything is I try to protect people from, I hate to say protect people from me, but to a certain extent, what the exercise is now is trying to build my companies around neurotypical, the majority. Right. And this is why the majority came to be the majority. Right. So there was, if we're looking at the entire spectrum and possibilities of the world and people and personalities and, intellectual abilities, the spectrum is the world. It's just unlimited. It's infinite. Right. And some group of people said, okay, well, we're going to select this little box, this little square out of infinity and call that normal. And people who fit within this box are in regular classrooms throughout their education. Right? They're in the regular classrooms. We're going to build everything for them. We're building math and science and English and all of the way we teach these things for this group of people, this group of thinkers, this group of behaviors, right? And so everything was built around this group, which we now call neurotypical people, right? The average, right? And so not saying that they're average in thinking because we're all different, but there's this group. If you're anywhere within that square, if you as a dot fall within that square, then you are neurotypical. Anywhere within. So, but two neurotypicals aren't even going to be the same, but they're within that square, which means they should relatively succeed within the way the world is designed because the world has been designed for them. The things, society, not the world, but the society, okay, at the society level was designed for them or for you. And so what I'm trying to do is, in retrospect, instead of trying to create something different, which is my whole life is, okay, this is how everybody does it. How can I do it different, better, faster, smoother? Like, that's how my brain works, right? So that's why I would come up with these crazy inventions that people would be like, oh my God, that's crazy. Who would ever have a sock store? Who would ever use hair headbands to lock the lid on a pot of chitlins so that it doesn't spill in the car? Like, who would think to do those things? Yeah, that's me. That's Kedra, the inventor. I could find something new to do with anything. Well, neurotypicals that fit within the square don't necessarily do that. They use the things that people outside the square just make up. We just make it up because we are not limited by the definition of what that thing is. Just because it says it's a headband doesn't mean that if I have a pot that has a lid that won't lock, but it has two handles on the side of the pot so that I can grab it with both hands, that I couldn't take a headband that is the perfect size and stretch it from one handle, put it over one handle, stretch it across the top and over the little lid, thing that you raise up with. I don't know what that thing, the lid, whatever the top thing is, all the way to the other side handle. And now that headband is stretched so tight that lid can't come out if you turn that pot upside down. And it works. So technically, I could have just grabbed the headband, went to the manufacturer, and reproduced it as a pot locker. Right? And it's funny, I don't necessarily remember, because this has happened so many times in my life where I quote unquote quasi invent something and then I see it later. And so I think that exists now. Obviously, it's not a headband, but a band that does that will actually lock the pot. And then, of course, there have always been pots you can pay really exorbitant amount of money for that would lock. But what I'm trying to do now is to build the business around that square. And I find that to be one of the hardest exercises that I've done in my life to date. And I've done a lot of stuff. A lot of businesses, a lot of business starts and then stops, which is a whole nother episode. But this is by far one of the hardest tasks, is building something for the way that square of people operate, because I don't understand it. And, it would seem that in order to mask, you have to be able to copy. You have to be able to recognize what to copy and then copy it. You have to be able to act. That's it. Because they're not lateral thinkers. They're not going that deep. So if I act the way that they act, then they assume that I think the way that they think, which is not true. If something in this episode stayed with you, let it. You don't have to resolve it today. I'll see you next time.